All right, guys, welcome back to the Heights Podcast, episode 7, here with Coach Hedrick. I'm JP Kuhlman. Today we have a neat topic, what we feed ourselves with, right?
Yes.
So physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all the things, right? Coach Hedrick, right? He's a football coach, talks to his boys a lot about what they're putting in their bodies. We'll talk more about what we're putting in our souls. But Coach Hedrick, wanted to start here. I know you did some intermittent fasting. Are you taking a fast from the fasting? How's that going?
Well, I've done it a lot. I do it often, but I did not do it very well this past weekend. We celebrated. Celebrated a birthday party or a birthday for Luke, my son, and we were away for 4 days with a lot of college kids, and I did not really adhere to the fasting as well as I should have.
How are you feeling today? Are you
I'm
recovered?
tired. I am tired. I am definitely tired.
Slightly
off. I'm not quite on my A game, but yeah, we survived, and we'll get back to it this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, how about just as an athlete? You know, you've been around it forever. Can you tell when you're like eating well? You're like, man, I'm eating the right things. I feel stronger and healthier, more energy. As opposed to like, man, I just spent a weekend eating pizza and whatever. You know, I don't know. I mean, everyone has that. You know?
I think we all can. Yeah, absolutely. There's a big difference. For me, I mean, I'm 54 years old, so I can certainly tell when I'm not taking good care of myself or when I am, if I'm not putting the right things in. For sure, I can feel the difference. So yeah, that's a big topic. I think it's a really good topic for not just our nutritionally speaking, or what we're actually feeding ourselves from a food perspective or drink perspective, but for all the other things too that we kind of allow to come into our minds, our bodies, our souls. Yeah,
because we feed right with food. Yeah, we're body and soul. You know, and it's cool to think about too how it's connected. I know we were talking, earlier with Miss Luter and Sarah, and how so often when we eat really well, we actually feel good too. We positive outlook, more energy, and it impacts like our mood and even our soul, right? And I think even similar to, man, when I'm feeding the soul with the right things, I feel stronger, more energy physically. It's funny how we're so connected, and we're not this like body soul disintegrated being, but we're union, right? That body soul union.
Yeah. And one whole part for sure, and it all comes together.
Yeah.
So if we're not taking care of, I mean, you have to be complete, right? So if you're not taking care of one part of it, then you're gonna feel deficient somewhere else. So when everything's going right, is when we feel our best.
Yeah, we feel. We're clicking. Now, how about we're obviously food, right? Everyone knows when I eat well, I feel good. When I don't feel as good. And same thing in sports, right? I mean, that's why every team has a nutritionist now. We even have people on staff here, right? We have some of our coaches who work together on what should our kids be eating, not the chicken fingers at lunch every day, and even though they are good. But what about at a deeper level, just really because we're constantly feeding ourselves from what we watch, what we listen to, what we're looking at on our phone, and just want to hear your experience of your life journey of, man, those moments where you fed your heart and your soul in a good way, and those moments maybe you didn't, and how that impacted your life.
Yeah, I mean, JP, that's why I wanted to talk about this.
This was your idea.
Yeah, what are we feeding ourselves? And again, I didn't really clarify this up front, but all of this, even this podcast, for me is my own journey. And so it's my opportunity to sort of be introspective and to think about, what am I actually doing? What am I actually feeding myself? How am I living my life? And then to share that with people, particularly the Bishop Moore community, who I'm so close to, is really what I want to do. So I don't have the answers. I just have my experiences, right? I just have what I've thought about, what I've done, what has worked for me, what I've read, what I've listened to, what I've learned. And so the reason I thought this was such a good topic for us is because I think that it's so hard to pay attention to and be intentional about what we're actually allowing into our bodies and our minds and our hearts and souls. And I think that that's one of the secrets to life, to a good life, to a happy life, is if we're able to make those decisions and understand that we do it on a daily basis. And it's not as hard as we think, is what I'm starting to discover. It's taken me a really long time to figure that out, but that's been really it's kind of a cool discovery for me.
Yeah. And I like how you said it's not as hard as you think, but it does take a choice. Like eating fast food, like it's easy, like it's quick, it's like tastes good going down, but it's really not that hard to say, oh, we'll just wait till dinner at home. Mom's got food. Like it's not that hard, but it does take a choice, and I think the same thing in our in our hearts and our souls. like the easy thing would just be to go home and look at Instagram or Facebook or whatever, like and just scan, and that's like feeding me for 2 hours, 3 hours,
Right.
or watching TV for 4 hours. Like it's easy to do that, but it takes a choice to say, you know what? No, I'm gonna take this time to go for a run. I'm gonna take this time to, stop by the chapel, say a prayer. I'm gonna take this time to spend time with my wife or my kids, or
Right.
like it's a choice. It's the choice we know is the right one, but so often we just go with the flow, and what we're just like the easiest thing to do is just to sit there and kind of look at our phone.
Yeah.
So it takes that choice.
Yep.
The power of the choice.
And it seems like a drastic change.
Yeah.
And so people, myself included, we think, man, I'd like to be more like that. I'd like to be healthier. I'd like to be more fit. I'd like to be more spiritual. I'd like to be more positive. But I don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
That would take a lot of work. And so the idea is that it's really not that hard. It's just daily habits. It's just one little thing after the other. It's just starting. There's that great book. James Clear wrote the book about Atomic Habits, which a lot of people have read. I think it's fairly popular. And I remember him saying in that book that one of the ways to start to get in better shape is to go exercise. But to think, oh my gosh, I have to lose 60 pounds and I have to start exercising, that's just going to be a miserable experience. And that turns people off. What he would say to do is the first step would just simply be to get out of bed and put your shoes on.
Yeah. Kind of just the simple steps.
Yeah, just put your shoes on.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And then you can take them back off and start the next day, put your shoes back on. And then maybe you're going to just go out the front door.
Yeah.
And pick up the newspaper. You know what I mean? It's just little tiny steps. But pretty soon, like getting out of bed and putting your shoes on is not that big of a deal. Now it's like, well, shoot, I got my shoes on.
Yeah.
Might as well go for a walk.
Yeah.
Right. But I like that concept. I mean, that's been big for me. I started to do things like that in my life, more so for my spiritual life. And it's really made a difference.
No, that's great, man. Yeah, I like to think too. I mean, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Because if you look at someone who's really, like you said, living the good life, living a really beautifully, authentically like Christian life, or in their vocation to the heights that we're talking about. Like when we see it, we know it. We're like, wow, that person inspires me. I know we talked about Inky Johnson. Maybe we'll talk about him a little more. But when we see it, it inspires us. But it can also be intimidating to say, man, I can't be like that. I can't have my life together like that. And no one has their life fully together.
No.
But what does it take? It takes little steps.
Right.
These choices, like, man, am I gonna just stare at my screen for an hour, or am I gonna go for a run, or do my homework, or do what a little bit harder, but more beneficial in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about Inky.
Yeah,
Inky
yeah. Tell us about Inky. Yeah.
Well, Inky Johnson is a former Tennessee Volunteer football player, college football player, really, really good defensive back, and he had a terrible injury right before his senior year, or during his senior year. I think he was getting ready to get drafted. This is years ago. And Inky's probably in his late 30s now, I would guess. So it was a while back, but he he turned tragedy into triumph. Basically, he decided that he wasn't going to let it. He ended up having this terrible injury, lost his arm, had to have it amputated, and a lot of complications came with that. But now as an motivational speaker, he has his own podcast. He does a lot for a lot of people, and he's really great. But when we're talking about what do we feed ourselves, he often says, I'm picking that up.
I love that.
And he says it in a really cool way, which I can't pull off. But I love the way he says it. In other words, he's listening to somebody, or he's reading something, or he's hearing an idea, and he is making a choice at that moment to say, oh, I'm going to pick that up. I like that. That is something that I'm going to take in and make that a part of who I am.
Gosh.
And to think of it that way is kind of a cool concept as well. Just to, what are we picking up?
Yeah.
You say things to me all the time, and I pick it up.
Yeah.
Or Sarah says something, and I pick it up.
Pick
or
it up.
Nico says, I do that. I don't say it. I'd like to say it.
But you are picking it up.
I practice it when people aren't around. I say the way Inky says it, but I can't do that.
Yeah, but man, I love that. I'm picking that up because we're constantly picking things up, whether we know it or not. A lot of times it's negative. We kind of have a tendency to think less of ourselves. Like, I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't do it, right? I'm playing this team that's really good. There's no way we can beat them, right? Whatever that is, right? We're picking it up. Unless we make a choice to say, no, I'm going to pick up the things that are good for me. I'm going to pick up the things that are going to inspire me to the heights, And that's why we need, I was talking to these 8th graders at a retreat the other day, and one of the things I shared with them was like, when you go to high school, man, you got to pick the right friends, because those friends are going to determine, you have your choices to make, but those friends in a lot of aspects determine the man or woman you're going to become, because they, people often say we're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with,
Right.
So what are we picking up from them, from our friends, from our influences? And you could take a step forward of what are we watching? What are we listening to? So everything we're watching, listening to, we're picking it up, whether we know it or not. We might say, I just like the beat. I'm not listening to the words. Or I can watch this movie that's probably not good for me, but don't worry, it doesn't bother me. But man, we're picking everything up. We're feeding ourselves with things. What are we allowing into our hearts and our lives? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think about that all the time. And, now everything's on hyperspeed. I mean, our kids, our students, our kids, or the young people in particular, all of us really, I mean, they are just, social media is, everything's coming at you so fast. So you don't really, it's hard to even make a choice. It's like one thing after the other, and it's just flying into your head. And some of it we subconsciously pick up, whether we wanted to or not. And then ultimately, the idea is that whatever we're putting in, eventually it's coming out. Right? And we're gonna regurgitate those things. I always tell my kids all the time, I hate the F word. Hate it. Our football players know it. I don't like the word. I think it's a terrible word. I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And so I used to get really mad. My kids don't say it very often. They might, and when they're around me, they don't say it.
They know better.
But if you spend enough time with people who use the word all the time, and I have great friends, awesome people that they cuss, and that's just the way they are. It doesn't make them bad people. It's just, but if I'm around them all the time, I start saying it.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
So I'm picking it up subconsciously.
It's funny how that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, just to be intentional about kind of what we're accepting and what we're rejecting, I think is really important.
Yeah. Gosh, man, as you were talking, I kind of at a deeper spiritual level, I just kind of thought back to how did Jesus decide to feed us? As Catholics, we believe that the Eucharist, Christ himself, his body and blood, that it's the greatest gift he's given us, to literally be inside of us physically, right, spiritually. So when we receive the Eucharist, we're literally being fed by God himself, and we could do it in so many ways, by prayer, by reading his word in the scriptures, but, sharing and being in a Bible study. But man, the deepest way he gives us to be fed is his body and blood in the Eucharist. And I kind of think back to just to, theologically speaking, but in the beginning, how did we fall? Is we ate something, right? That idea of the fruit, and it's not that God didn't want to feed us with what was good. He, you go back to that story of Genesis 1-2, right? And Adam and Eve in the garden. There's so much truth there, right? And one of the greatest truths is that instead of receiving the gift, we went and grabbed it. We said, I'm going to take it for myself. I'm going to take this food that I want for myself, right? And that was the sin. There was this pride saying, God, I can't trust you, right? I'm going to go for it myself. When in reality, the answer to that was God, Christ coming to us in the incarnation saying, I'm going to give you myself. I'm going to give you all that your heart desires in the Eucharist, right? In myself, in my body and blood, my redemption that I give to you. And I just think about how often Jesus used that analogy of being fed. How he just knows so deeply that our hearts are hungry. And I think the basis for our journey with him is realizing, man, I'm hungry.
Right.
None of these things are filling my heart, even what that fruit represents, whatever it is, accolades, success, money, this girlfriend or boyfriend I really like, whatever, social media likes, whatever, right? That's going to fill this hunger I have, And it might for a day, it might for 2 days or an hour, whatever, right? For 3 seconds. But in the long run, we realize, oh man, this hunger I have, right? And being comfortable with realizing that I'm not enough as I am, right? That God, I need you. I have this hunger that we're made for him, right? And unless we fill that hunger with him, right, the fulfillment he brings, then we're always going to be grasping and everything,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and he's telling us all the time, but we don't listen because we're in too much of a hurry or we're not disciplined enough or we're too easily influenced. And it's hard to listen and just say, what's the choice I'm supposed to make?
Yeah.
And what's really going to fulfill me? What's really going to satisfy me? What's really going to change me as a person for good, for so that I can influence others and do things in a positive way.
Yeah.
And something that's sustainable. We talk about that all the time. Is all of these things, these happinesses, these joys that we think we discover. They're not really sustainable.
Yeah.
And the idea is what can we sustain in our lives?
Man, I remember.
And I think that's it.
Sorry, go ahead, Ricky.
No, that's it.
No, I might have shared this on a previous episode, but in high school, all I wanted was to play basketball in college.
Yeah.
And you just saw me shoot a 3, and I nailed it, right?
You did.
But
you did. Nice.
Just want everybody to know that. But and all I wanted to do was play college basketball. And I remember going into my senior year, thinking like, once these colleges start calling, I'm going to be completely fulfilled and cloud 9. Life's going to be perfect, And I remember that summer going into senior year, having a really good summer on the court, and all these colleges were calling. And it was such a blessing. But I'll never forget, there was a moment, I may have shared this, but I was just I remember exactly where I was sitting at my parents' house. I was about to go out in the backyard and shoot some hoops, but I felt this like deep sadness. And I thought to myself, man, everything is perfect on the surface, and all these colleges want me to play for them. My dream is coming true. But deep down, I realized, man, why am I not as happy as I thought I would be when I thought those colleges would call? Yeah. So I felt this need to fill this hunger with basketball, with success, with applause, whatever, right? With recognition, so that I could say I'm going to play in college and my friends would be impressed. But I wasn't satisfied. That hunger I had. And I think each one of us, right? Like, our society's so good at kind of deadening that, not deadening it, but kind of making us not think, being so amped up, hyper speed, like distracted that we don't think about it, right? We can just stay as busy as we want and not think about it. But man, when we slow down, we say, all right, let's look at the heart of it. Like, what's going on in our hearts? What's that emptiness? What are we filling it with, And if it's not God, if it's not like the truth of what we're called to live in, what is filling that,
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of going a million directions.
No, you are. I think slowing down is so important.
Yeah.
And that's really hard to do, especially in our society today. So what about this quote? It's very common. Everybody's heard it a million times. Comparison is the thief of joy. What about that quote? I mean, what does that make you think about? Actually, Teddy Roosevelt said that years and years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it's really applicable today in terms of our society and social media, and how that pulls at people all the time. And you can wake up in the morning feeling really good, man, you look good, feel good, and hop on social media and see somebody, a friend of yours, who looks better, or just went to a cooler place, or just did something, just ran a marathon when you only ran 2 miles, and all of a sudden you're like, man, I got a lot of work to do. We compare ourselves all the time, and it steals some of the joy that we probably should have, that we shouldn't be getting from that place anyways, right? So I'm always curious from somebody like you, who has really familiarized yourself with the Word and the Bible. What does it say about comparison, or does it really? I don't want to put you on the spot.
No,
but does it kind of talk about that a little bit?
I think one of the biggest things is the apostles. Like, you think about these apostles, these 12, they were all men that Jesus chose, and they were all from different professions, different backgrounds. Like, some were fishermen, one was a tax collector, one was a zealot who fought against the Romans, didn't want the Roman rule. So all these guys, they were constantly kind of like jockeying for who's your favorite, like who's going to be the man, I'm sure you remember. And Jesus constantly is like, guys, come on, like, what are you doing? Like, don't you know my heart, And it kind of makes me think of, there's this pilgrimage called the Camino in Spain and France and Portugal. It really, it culminates in Santiago in Spain, where St. James is buried. And I was able to do that a couple of years back. It's such a beautiful experience before I was married, and taking 3 weeks to be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to do that now. But one of the things they say on the Camino is walk your Camino. Like, there's so many people that some people are slow, some are fast, some are in wheelchairs. So everyone's going at a different pace, and you kind of pass each other, and the next day you might see them. They might finish ahead of you. And they say the worst thing you do on the Camino is compare with the person next to you. So compare how far are you going today?
Right.
And they constantly, the people who've done it for years and are kind of help guide you, they say, walk your Camino. Because that's the only right way to do the Camino,
Right.
And I think it's so true in our life, and that's another choice we have to make, to say, you made the example of running 2 miles versus a marathon. Man, if I can only run two miles and this guy's running 26 miles, like I got to be satisfied with no, I'm accomplishing what I'm called to do today.
Right.
And that guy's called to do 26 miles,
Yeah.
And it's so hard to stay in our Camino, but and still push ourselves, right? Still push ourselves outside our comfort zone. But sometimes, like you said, we compare, and Instagram and social media, it's like, oh man, I thought I had a beautiful family. Look at that family. We're not doing it right. And even as a dad now, we always talk about with other couples like, oh, is your kid walking yet? Oh man, ours isn't. Like we feel terrible.
Oh yeah.
And are we doing a bad job? But so I think absolutely comparison and like is not what Christ and God wants us to do. He wants us to walk our communion with Him. To be the best. I don't know. What do you think?
No, that's exactly what I think. I mean, you have to keep things in perspective and prioritize what's really important. But again, for me to think about what is God asking me to do and who is He asking me to be, and He's not asking me to be JP or Miko. He's asking me to be me. And so, what does that really mean? So, I think that's just a process that takes some time and thought and prayer and quiet. Just to feel comfortable with really that reality that's who I'm supposed to be.
I think, Matt, what you just said too, when it comes to like the concrete practical items, like how do I feed myself with the right things spiritually, emotionally, it looks different for each person. Like my prayer life or my journey is different than yours, it's different than the next person's. But it's about, like you said, is taking a step back to say this is important. Like how do I do this in my life with my schedule, my vocation? Because the calling of you, who no longer has kids in the house, and the calling of me with a baby at home might look a little bit different. As the football coach, and I don't have practice at 6 a.m., So our lives look different, but the call is still the same, is to ask God, man, how do you want me to journey with you? How do you want me to be fed by you in the way you're calling me in my life, in my Camino?
Yeah.
So a couple of the practical things, I know we talked earlier, but like making time for prayer, whether that's whatever time, morning, night, whatever time of the day. One thing I used to do in college, I tell the students this, is setting an alarm on their phone for a certain time of the day. Like I think I set it for 3 p.m., which is the hour Jesus died. And I was like, man, every day at 3, I'm going to say a prayer. So in college, I remember every day at 3, my alarm would go off and be like, oh man, I got to say a prayer,
Yeah.
So concrete things like that. I know there's Father Mike Schmidt says Bible in a year, which a lot of people, so many blessings from it. It's just a little bit every day to go through the scriptures, and he gives commentary that's super helpful. Books as well, like reading like some of these reflection books that are phenomenal about helping us like take a step back and say, man, like just like a paragraph each day, and say, okay, I can take 20 seconds each day to read that, just something small to feed ourselves with. And I don't know if you have other practical ones that you want to kind of throw in there.
Well, I think first of all, I would say to be able to say yes.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because, and Sarah and I have talked about this a little bit, we're all being called. We're always being called. And it's easy to say, oh, I didn't hear that. I'm not really listening. But to be able to say yes, I said yes to an invitation to go to a concert by Lauren Daigle, who I literally had never heard of. Had never been to a Christian music concert. And I went, and it was awesome. She was fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. And so then I thought, wow, just the lyrics, the words from these songs really elicits a response from me in a really positive way. And so I thought, what can I do now? So I would get in my car in the morning. My car's old. I don't have all the fancy stuff. But I would ask my phone to play that song. And so now on my way to work, which takes 2.5 minutes, I would hear that song. So now I'm feeding myself with those words and putting myself in this frame of mind every single morning. Now I've branched out because the next song that came on, I was like, whoa, that's a good song. So now I've learned 4 or 5 songs that I'll play throughout my day. And of course, when you hear a song the first thing in the morning, that song's in your head all day. So if it's the wrong song, I mean, all songs aren't bad, but if it's not a meaningful song, then you're just randomly singing things in your head all day long. But if it's something meaningful,
it kind of stays
then it's
with
sort
you.
of like this constant reminder throughout the day. So that's one of the things I think for me has been really good. We talked about, my good friend asked me about, or talked to me about the red letters in the Bible, which I wasn't really that familiar with. And he said he writes them. He's written all the red letters in a journal. There's a really intentional way for him. And for me, I related that really well. It's sort of like a challenge. Like, okay, that's a daily, that's like doing 50 push-ups a day or whatever, right? Which I respond to. And so next thing I know, he sends me a Bible and a journal, and I get it in the mail. It's really nice. It's a really nice pen. So now I'm like, oh, now I really got to do this.
He invested in you.
He invested in me. And so that's another thing. I see that Bible every day in my desk. And so I make a choice right then and there. Like, okay, am I going to write a little bit here? Am I going to read a little bit here? And some days I don't, quite honestly. But that's certainly a step in the right direction for me to make some daily habits, some little
awesome,
habits.
Man.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. At Mass, we'll kind of wrap up here, but at Mass this morning, the gospel is John chapter 10, verse 10. It's my favorite verse in the whole Bible. Jesus says, I've come to give you life so you may have it more abundantly, like the abundance of life.
Right.
And sometimes when we look at our faith and there's sometimes even the students are like, man, there's so many rules, there's so many things, and like, I have to do this, I have to do that. But at the heart of it, what is it all about? It's about Christ wanting to get us that fullness of life we're made for. And the rules and the beliefs and the doctrines, it's meant to guide us. Kind of like if you look at a playground for kids to have fun, what do you need surrounding the playground?
Yeah.
You need a fence, right? Like I took Gemma yesterday to the park, and they had a great fence. Thank goodness, because if not, she would have walked right into the cars. But man, what our faith is all about, helping us to live that fullness of life. And a lot of times that fullness of life, just like if you want to be the greatest athlete you can be, it takes discipline. It takes a choice. It takes working hard. It's the same thing in our relationships. It takes this decision to say, man, I'm going to spend this time with this person who I care about. I'd rather just sit there and relax and not do anything, but I know they need me right now. Or prayer, right? Like, I haven't prayed yet today. I'd rather just like call it and turn on the TV, but man, I should probably talk to God about today. So it's that choice, but it's discipline, but it's what we're made for, that fullness of life.
Right.
I think it's so important to remember.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
All right, man. Anything else, man?
I think that's it.
So don't eat at you can eat Chick-fil-A, not McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, but
people love Chick-fil-A.
Chick-fil-A, man.
Yeah, it's very popular.
Yeah. All right, man. Appreciate it, man. That was
Thanks,
good.
JP.
All right, guys. We'll see you soon. God bless.
Thank you.